Cop calls black woman trash, then panics when he learns she runs the state police. "Get off my street, trash!" The words fell like a cold blade. A cup of hot coffee splashed straight onto the chest of the black woman. Steam rose, the burnt smell spreading through the air. Her shirt was drenched, her skin stinging from the heat. But Naomi Carter did not step back. A heavy boot came down on her phone, shattered. The screen burst into a spiderweb of light, reflecting the sneer of the man wearing a police badge. 2 months of investigation. All her notes on cases of police brutality ripped apart like snowflakes of paper. The wind caught the scattered pages, swirling them around Naomi Carter's feet, painting a white storm over the wet asphalt. She stood still. Her eyes were dark as obsidian. A silent storm gathered in her chest. Sergeant Eric Mason stepped closer, his breath wryer of tobacco and power. "You people do not belong here." She pressed her lips together. No reaction. In her mind, only one thought remained. He just signed his own death warrant. Patrol lights swept across the alley. Another car pulled over. A young female officer, Lauren Vega, stepped out. Her face was pale, trembling. The scene before her made her swallow hard. The man she once admired was acting like a predator. "Everything okay, Sergeant, routine check," Mason replied, voice dripping with authority. He held the driver's license under his flashlight. Jenna Price, a fake name, and he had no idea. In the flash of red and blue lights, Naomi Carter became a mirror reflecting the entire system. A system that believed a person's dignity could be torn apart just because of skin color. Vega heard the radio. No record. But instead of stopping, Mason clenched his jaw. He wanted something else to prove she was guilty. The wind blew again, flipping through the pages marked with dates, times, badge numbers, lines of ink alive, like the victims Naomi Carter had once met. They circled Mason's boots like restless spirits demanding justice. Hands on the wall, Naomi Carter rose slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Vega swallowed. Something was swelling and expanding, lie ready to explode. Mason stepped away briefly, rummaging through the trunk. The metallic scrape of weapons echoed. The young officer glanced at Naomi Carter. Their eyes met a silent message. Choose your side. Mason returned each step heavy as fate. The air in the alley thickened. Naomi Carter stood still, body trembling from the cold, but her gaze was sharper than a blade. He thought she was afraid, but in truth she was counting each breath, each procedural violation he was making. A gust of wind swept by, lifting the final report page and dropping it on Mason's boot. Under the flickering patrol light, the words blurred: badge 5917, pending investigation. He did not notice, but Naomi Carter did, and she smiled. A small, cold smile enough to make anyone wonder, who's the real prey now? From a distance, the patrol siren wailed. Sergeant Eric Mason barked, "Search her! I smell marijuana!" Lauren Vega stood frozen, her finger brushing the red button on her vest, the one that activated her body camera. And in that very instant, justice began to breathe. Face the wall. Hands up. Mason's voice was dry metal scraping against metal. A chill crept down Naomi Carter's spine. She turned slowly, palms pressing against the damp brick. The night thickened around them, filled only with the soft patter of rain on concrete and the flickering patrol lights beating like the pulse of a demon. Vega stood nearby, her hand trembling beside her radio. She could see it clearly now. Mason was not doing his job. He was performing. Every movement, every word radiated the warped pleasure of a man who believed he had the right to decide another person's worth. "Smells like marijuana," he said, eyes narrowing. "Coffee, Sergeant Mason." Vega's voice was quiet, but it cracked the air open. He snapped his head toward her, his gaze cold and hollow. "I smell it. That is evidence. Evidence The word itself turned like a key in the lock of fate. Mason stepped closer. His hands moved over Naomi Carter's body, slow, deliberate, not searching for weapons, but for a way to crush dignity. He stopped at her inner pocket. His fingers slid deep, then withdrew, empty. But a second later in his hand appeared a small plastic bag, white clean sealed. It glimmered under the patrol lights, like a cheap magic trick. Vega froze. She had seen his hand empty. So, where did that bag come from? Cocaine, Mason said, his voice oozing triumph. Told you people like her are never innocent. He held the bag up the light, reflecting in his eyes like a knife. Naomi Carter stayed silent. No resistance, no words, only a look. Not the look of the Aquest, but of the witness memorizing her accuser's sin. You are under arrest for possession of illegal substances, Mason said. The click of the handcuffs rang out 3 sharp, cold snaps. Vega felt her blood rush to her face. Each click drove straight into her conscience. She saw Naomi Carter's wrists, tightened skin scraping, a thin line of blood seeping. But not a sound escaped her. A raindrop slid down Vega's cheek, cold as guilt. She wanted to shout to stop it, to do the right thing, but her mouth stayed sealed shut. Mason spoke into his radio. 1 suspect in custody requesting transport. His tone calm, professional, like a man completing his duty, perfectly composed. As the police car rolled away, Naomi Carter lifted her head, her eyes finding Vega through the rain-streaked window. No anger, no fear, just a gaze that knew everything. Vega looked down at her vest. The small red light on her camera blinked steadily. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted it, the tiny glow cutting through rain and flashing lights. For the first time, she truly understood that the truth was already breathing. She wondered, who did I just save, or was it she who just saved me? The next morning inside the precinct, Mason shoved Naomi Carter toward the duty desk. That same victorious smile was plastered on his face. But when she spoke her first 4 words, the entire room froze solid. I work in law enforcement. 4 words slipped out softly, but hit the cold floor like bullets dropping into a steel shell. Mason froze. The smirk on his lips solidified mid-curve, then shattered like ice cracking under fluorescent light. Behind him, Vega's heart pounded. She could not tell what drained the color from his face, the words themselves, or the deadly calm hidden beneath them. Naomi Carter was shoved toward the duty desk. Her wrists still bore red-purple marks from the cuffs. The burnt scent of coffee mixed with the metallic tang of blood. What department? Mason asked, struggling to sound normal, but his voice came out rough. Federal Investigations Agency, Naomi Carter answered. Her tone was flat as still water, so calm it was terrifying. The room tilted. Every sound seemed to be sucked into the void between them. Lieutenant Mark Ellis, the duty officer, looked up from his computer and squinted. Do you have identification to prove that Naomi Carter looked straight at him? In the pocket of my coat. He forgot to take it during his search. Ellis turned to Mason. The sergeant's face flushed red. His hands tightened around the cuffs. She is lying. I searched thoroughly. Then search again, Ellis said. Mason stiffened, stepped forward, and shoved his hand into the soaked coat pocket. A moment of silence, then rustle. His fingers brushed something thin and cold. A slim leather wallet hidden in a sealed lining. He pulled it out. The entire room held its breath. The ID gleamed under the yellow light. Special Agent Naomi Carter, Internal Affairs Division. The seal was real. The photo real. The signature real. The air thickened as if all the oxygen had vanished. Ellis looked at Mason and said slowly, You do realize that if this badge is real, you just arrested your superior. Mason swallowed, his voice cracking. That is impossible. She is a criminal. I found cocaine on her. Naomi Carter tilted her head slightly, smiling faintly like a breeze brushing past. "The cocaine you placed in my pocket." Her words pierced through the room like a knife, cutting through a mask of morality. Ellis turned to Vega. "You witnessed this?" Vega nodded. "And my camera is recording." A tiny red light blinked steadily on her vest. Mason stepped back. His whole body seemed stripped bare by evidence. "This little stunt will end your career," he said, his voice trembling like a man about to sink. "This is not a stunt," Naomi Carter replied. "It is an internal investigation, a 3-year discrimination case in this district, and you, Sergeant, just added your name to the list." Ellis removed the cuffs from Naomi's wrists. The metallic clank on the table rang out heavy as a verdict. Mason stood, frozen lips moving soundlessly. "Call the state police," Naomi ordered, "and make sure every piece of evidence from this room goes directly to the Inspector General's office through no one else." Vega looked at her and saw not just a superior officer, but a symbol of justice that did not need to shout to make men tremble. Outside, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating Mason's face, pale as paper. Naomi turned to Vega, her voice low and firm. "Keep the camera rolling. The real game has just begun." Upstairs in the second-floor conference room, officers began to gather. Rumors of an undercover agent humiliated inside the precinct spread like wildfire. And while Mason scrambled to deny everything, an 2-minute video had already been sent to the Statewide Oversight Bureau with a single note attached. "Start at timestamp 07:12. The conference room on the second floor of the Lakeside Police Department blazed with white light. On the giant screen, footage from Vega's body camera played back shaky image static noise. Then Mason's voice broke through. "Get your black ass off my street, trash." The air turned thick. No one dared to cough. Dozens of uniformed eyes fixed on the screen, as if staring into a mirror that reflected themselves. Naomi stood at the head of the table, her dark coat sharp against the sterile light. No trace of injury remained, only a chilling composure. Vega sat beside her, hands clasped tightly in her lap, thumbs trembling. Ellis, the duty lieutenant, guarded the door, his eyes heavy with guilt. "Zoom in at frame 17:12, Naomi ordered. The technician obeyed. The slowed footage showed Mason pressing toward Naomi, his hand empty. One beat two, his hand plunged into her pocket. When it emerged, a small plastic bag was suddenly there, glinting under red-blue lights. No commentary was needed. The truth spoke for itself. A young officer whispered, "God." Mason sat opposite, face drained white. He started to speak, but Naomi cut him off. "Do not. You have already said enough on the video." Her voice was cold, sharp like shattered glass. "From now on, every word you speak will be recorded. I want to hear how you justify your own crimes." Mason gave a broken laugh. "You set me up. This whole video, you edited it." "Really?" Naomi asked, unblinking. "Then explain the metallic sound inside your trunk at 6:35, right before you found your evidence." "I had the audio analyzed. It matches the sound of an evidence locker being opened." Mason swallowed hard. No more excuses. His fingers dug into the armrest, sweat dripping down his neck. "You think you insulted just one black woman?" Naomi said, her tone sinking low, each word hammering against the table. "But what you really did was light a match under a rotting system." Vega turned away. She remembered that night, the moment she stood silent, afraid to speak. The red camera light was on now, but her heart was still shadowed. She had almost become an accomplice out of fear. The door burst open. Deputy Inspector Karen Doyle entered, followed by 2 internal affairs investigators. The atmosphere shifted instantly. "This case is now under state jurisdiction," Doyle announced. All evidence will be sealed. Sergeant Mason, you are under arrest for evidence tampering and racial discrimination in the line of duty. The click of handcuffs echoed through the room. Mason stood head bowed. No one said a word. The silence was heavier than any verdict. As he was led away, Naomi turned to Vega. Do you know the most important moment in this case? Vega hesitated. When I turned the camera on. No, Naomi replied. It was before that. When you hesitated when you knew something was wrong but had not yet acted. That is the line between fear and courage. And you crossed it. Vega bowed her head, eyes wet. In that instant, she understood justice is not about defeating evil. It is about defeating the silence inside yourself. Doyle took the file, skimmed through it, and asked, Have we seen everything? Not yet, Naomi said. I need to trace the source of the cocaine bag in the evidence vault. He could not have gotten it without help. Doyle's expression darkened. Who do you suspect? His direct superior, Lieutenant Gordon Blake. I want an immediate confrontation. The room glowed beneath the white lights again. 2 hours later, Blake entered the interrogation room. The light reflected off his forehead. His eyes shifted uneasily. When Naomi started the projector, the frame froze on Mason. Opening the locker, its access code authorized by Blake himself. The entire room went still. This, Naomi said quietly, is the moment the system incriminates itself. The interrogation room was deathly quiet. The white neon lights were so bright, every flaw on a face lay exposed and naked. Blake, the lieutenant in charge of the Lakeside district, sat opposite Naomi. He tried to keep his composure, but sweat beaded at his collar like oil leaking from an old machine pushed past its capacity. Lieutenant, Naomi said, her voice light but heavy as lead. I have a video I need you to watch. The screen lit up. The footage showed Mason opening a safe, entering the code. L845, Blake's personal code. A short beep. The safe opened. Inside an old evidence bag case marked number 527C, the narcotics scheduled for destruction. The room froze. Deputy Inspector Karen Doyle folded her arms, her gaze as sharp as a blade. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Blake forced a smile. I do not remember. Maybe Mason borrowed the code. I did not know. Not remembering, Naomi repeated, is the way people choose to forget their own crimes. She pressed a button. Audio from the video played Mason murmuring, Thanks for the favor, boss. Blake went pale. Everything shattered. His moral shell fell away in pieces. He set me up, Blake stammered. 3 years ago, I failed to file a report on seized evidence. Mason found out and threatened to report me unless I helped him. I was forced. Forced? Naomi asked, her tone a cold cut. How many others have been forced like you, Lieutenant? How many have been forced into dealing with the darkness? That question hung in the air, tolling like a funeral bell. Vega bowed her head. She saw herself in that moment, the woman who had kept silent despite knowing it was wrong. Blake doubled over, choking out a hoarse sob. I was wrong. I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of being exposed. But then Mason turned into a monster I could not stop. You fed it with your silence, Naomi said. She stood, her voice hardening. Silence is not neutral. It is complicity. Doyle signaled to the investigators. Record the statement. Detain Blake on charges of conspiracy and concealing unlawful actions. Blake collapsed face down onto the metal table. The cuffs snapped onto his wrists. The click this time rang harsh like the clank of chains around a system collapsing from within. Mason, now locked in the adjacent holding room, howled, All of you are just like me. I am just the only one who got caught first. Naomi turned to Doyle. He is right about one thing. This is not the case of a single man. It is a cancer that has reached the bone marrow. Doyle looked at her, voice low. And we will cut it out. The words were clinical and clear, like a surgical blade touching the rotten core of justice. Naomi drew a deep breath. The marks Mason had left on her wrists were still there. She looked down. The wounds had not healed, but they were living proof of why she was here, to turn pain into testimony. The door opened. An officer burst in, Face Ash and Deputy Inspector. The evidence vault cameras just had all footage from the last 4 months erased. Everyone shot to their feet. That cannot be. Doyle tightened her jaw. Naomi said softly, Someone is cleaning up the trail, which means the mastermind is still out there. Doyle nodded and ordered, Freeze all servers, lock all access. I want to know who deleted that data. Naomi watched the screen go dark. The shadow reflected in her eyes. She understood this was the second fall. When justice seemed to have won, the abyss opened again. But unlike before, she did not tremble. She knew the real counterattack would begin from within the heart of darkness. Outside, rain began to fall again. Raindrops struck the interrogation room window, mirroring Naomi's face. She whispered, If the system will not clean itself, I will. The investigation room lights came up one last time, falling on Doyle's face. The woman who had come to see that this fight was no longer about one crooked cop, but about the soul of the entire force. 4 weeks later, Illinois State Court. Morning rain poured down, as if trying to wash away the city and the last stains clinging to its police force. A closed courtroom, lit only by the dim yellow glow falling across each face. Mason sat in the defendant's chair, his uniform replaced by an orange prison jumpsuit. Before him lay a thick stack of files, a record written in the sweat tears and silence of victims. Blake sat nearby, hollow-eyed, his hands trembling slightly, and Naomi, the internal affairs agent, stood by the witness stand, not to accuse, but to affirm the truth. Doyle, the deputy inspector, sat in the front row, her gaze sharp but sorrowful. Behind her, Vega clasped her hands tightly. She was not just there to witness the trial. She was there to prove that once truth is brought to light, no one can extinguish it. The judge read out the indictment, voice steady. Officer Eric Mason, charged with evidence tampering, abuse of power, assault, and racial discrimination while on duty. Lieutenant Gordon Blake, charged with complicity, obstruction, and falsification of evidence. The courtroom fell silent. The rhythmic tap of the judge's pen on wood sounded like the heartbeat of justice returning to life. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? The judge asked. Mason lifted his head. His eyes were sunken, his voice rough. No one is perfect. This system taught me that power is a weapon. I just used it before it could be used on me. Naomi looked at him and replied softly, No, Mason. Power is only a mirror. It reflects who you truly are. The words hung in the air, freezing the room. Vega's eyes glistened. She knew those words were not just for Mason. They were for everyone who had ever stayed silent, including herself. The judge nodded, his tone solemn. Sentenced 14 years in state prison without parole and permanent revocation of service rights. Lieutenant Gordon Blake, 7 years reduced for cooperation. The gavel struck. Thud. The sound was more than a verdict. It was an alarm bell for a system that had slept too long. Mason lowered his head, lips trembling. He turned to Naomi, his eyes hollow. You won. No, she said. Justice won. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Puddles on the steps reflected the pale sunlight, bright enough to reveal everything, but not enough to hide the scars. Vega stepped out, taking a deep breath. What now? Agent Naomi smiled faintly, not with joy, but with peace. Now we start again. There are 40 more districts on the list, and I need you. Vega paused for a moment, then nodded. After all this, I have learned what is truly terrifying. What is it? Not violence, legal silence. Naomi's gaze softened. Then you understand. We are not fighting people. We are fighting their shadows. They walked side by side along the wet pavement. Their footsteps blended with distant car horns, like a city's pulse finding its rhythm again. Behind them, Deputy Inspector Karen Doyle stepped out of the courthouse, phone in hand. "The press wants an interview," she said. "No need," Naomi replied. "I just want them to see one thing, that truth does not need a spokesperson. It exists, and it speaks for itself." Doyle smiled faintly. "The world needs more people like you." Naomi looked into the distance. "No, the world just needs fewer people like Mason." The words lingered, part benediction, part farewell for those who had fallen and those still walking the edge. Above, sunlight pierced the clouds spilling across the wet street. The beam glowed over Naomi's wrist, where faint cuff marks still remained. She looked at them and whispered, "It hurts, but it is worth it." She walked on without looking back. In the distance, a group of law students huddled over their phones, faces bright with youth. One girl murmured, "If an agent can go through all that and still fight for what is right, maybe we can too." Naomi heard it and smiled. That was the real reward, not the sentence, not the title, but a seed of faith replanted amid the ashes of fear. The final scene closed on Naomi gazing toward the city. The low rooftops, the trembling yellow lights flickering like the breath of justice reborn. On the phone in her hand, a new notification appeared. District 5, the investigation case file opened. She tapped it. The screen's glow reflected in her eyes, bright, steady, unafraid. Early afternoon sun slanted down Maple Avenue in Brookdale, where the 2nd Precinct stone block stood like a breathing slab of concrete. From a distance, the building looked cold and empty, as if no people lived inside. Only a machine named Power turning its gears and grinding everything caught between them. Naomi stopped the car at the gate and took off her sunglasses. The silver sign, the words "to serve and protect," had peeled almost bare, like the meaning itself had been worn away by time. Vega walked beside her, folder in hand. "Are we really going to start here?" she asked. "Yeah," Naomi answered, eyes fixed on the building. 40 districts. This one has the most civilian complaints. Start at the rotting root." They passed through the main lobby. The air reeked of stale cigarette smoke and cold coffee. Uniformed faces turned toward them, equal parts curiosity and caution. An older officer called out, "Another internal affairs check. There is nothing big here. You are in the wrong place." Naomi Carter gave a thin smile. "I hope you are right." The records room lay deep in the basement where light never reached. Doyle had issued the official notice. Open audit of detainee procedures 2021-2022. But when Vega accessed the system, the last 8 months of data were corrupted. "No way," she whispered. "There is no random chance that 8 months of records all disappear." Naomi stared at the dark screen. "Not random," she said. "Someone deleted exactly the files they needed hidden." She turned to the young technician, his hand still on the keyboard. "How long have you worked here? 4 years, ma'am? And have you ever heard of Lieutenant Randall Pierce, the evidence room supervisor?" The young man froze. "Pierce just went on leave." Naomi narrowed her eyes. On leave or allowed to vanish? Vega glanced at Naomi. The question hung like a needle in the dark. 3 hours later, they stood at Pierce's house. The front door was locked. A neighbor said, "I saw him move out last night." The truck left close to midnight. Naomi bent to the porch and picked up an envelope someone had dropped. Its corner was stained with cigarette ash. On it were only 2 words. "Sorry," inside a small black USB. She said nothing, only looked up, her expression hardening. Vega asked quietly, "What do you think is on it?" "Either the truth," Naomi replied, "or a trap." Back at the temporary office, Naomi plugged the USB into the computer. The screen lit up. A single folder appeared dated April 14th, Detainee Room 03. The video played. A white man handcuffed sat at a table. A tall officer approached his nameplate, read Pierce. Naomi held her breath. The footage jolted. A voice demanded, "Do you know who decides whether you live or die here?" Then a punch. 1 blow, 2. The man fell from his chair, blood spattering the lens. Pierce kept going, his eyes cold as steel. Then the door burst open. A woman's voice rang out, angry, panicked. "Stop, Pierce. What the hell are you doing?" Vega was stunned. "Who is she?" she asked. Naomi strained to see the frame. Brown hair, a dark coat, a nameplate catching the light. "Captain Linda Monroe, the head of the Brookdale District." The video ended with ragged breathing. Then the screen went black. Vega swallowed. She knew she was there. She saw everything. Naomi answered softly, "And maybe she is the one who ordered the data erased." The room chilled. The ceiling fan creaked a low growl like an angered beast. Vega whispered, "If Captain Monroe is involved, we are poking a hornet's nest." Naomi closed the laptop, her eyes bright. "Then we burn the whole nest. But this time, we do not make mistakes." Outside, night had fallen. The streetlights cast Naomi's face in a dim orange, both warm and menacing. Inside her, one question kept echoing. How many people became monsters simply because the system let them? She looked through the car window and saw her reflection overlap the distant police lights, one figure, 2 worlds. Justice and crime separated by a razor-thin line like glass. Vega asked quietly. "What now?" Agent Naomi replied, voice steady as a blade. "Tomorrow we go see Captain Monroe." That night, Naomi did not sleep. On the USB, there was another file she had not opened titled Only Evidence Latch A2. As her cursor hovered to click, the phone buzzed. Linda Monroe calling. The screen flared in the dark. She paused and drew a breath. The second battle had just begun. The phone rang again and again. The name on the screen, Captain Linda Monroe. Naomi sat motionless. The ringtone dug like a knife deeper into the silence between her breaths. She picked up. "Carter here." Monroe's voice came through low, dry, and calm to a terrifying degree. "I think we should talk alone. You do not need to bring Vega. Location: the old warehouse at Dock 12. 20 minutes. Then the line went dead. Naomi stood. Vega asked, "Who was that?" "The person who, if we make the wrong move, will make everything collapse." "Captain Monroe." "Yes. And she is scared?" Naomi's gaze hardened. When someone with power is scared, it means they are hiding something bigger. Dock 12 lay shrouded in fog. The pier lights blinked tired and orange. Containers stacked like rows of giant coffins full of secrets. Naomi walked into the old warehouse. Her heels clicked like a countdown. Monroe was already there. No uniform, only a black coat and eyes full of shadow. "You came faster than I expected," Monroe said. "Because I know you did not call just to chat," Naomi answered. Monroe snorted a dry laugh. "You think you know me?" "No," Naomi said slowly. "I only know guilt. It smells the same everywhere." A heavy pause. Monroe pulled a thick envelope from her pocket and flung it onto a wooden table. "This contains the list of the missing data cases you are looking for. But Carter, you do not understand. I was coerced." "Another coerced one," Naomi sneered. "Blake Pierce, now you." This system seems built to nurture fear, not responsibility. Monroe slammed her hand on the table, voice bursting out. You have no idea I tried to stop them. But when the administration and the prosecutor's office get involved, I had two choices: keep quiet or be destroyed. Naomi stepped closer. The space between them narrowed to a single breath. You chose silence, and every time you were silent, an innocent person died. Monroe staggered back, her eyes flickering. You think you are a savior, Carter? Do you know what those people up there will do to protect their reputations? I used to be like you. Believed justice was light, until that light burned my whole life down. Naomi met Monroe's eyes, voice cold, but carrying deep sorrow. The difference between you and me is I am willing to be burned if the flame can burn away the darkness. For a moment, Monroe bowed her head. Something between remorse and despair passed across her face. Then unexpectedly she whispered, I can help you, but once you open the second USB inside, there is no turning back. Naomi was silent. She knew that warning was not a threat. What do you want in return? Nothing. I just want someone brave enough to do what I could not. The next morning, Naomi returned to the temporary office. Vega was waiting, eyes rimmed with dark circles. You actually met Monroe? She asked. She is not a complete monster, Naomi replied. Just someone swallowed by the system she once served. She set Monroe's envelope on the table. Inside was a list, more than 40 closed cases with the same pattern. Cops kill civilians. Evidence disappears. No prosecutions. Vega breathed out, stunned. My God, they call this justice? Naomi answered quietly. No, it is tragedy labeled lawful. She opened the second USB evidence, A2. A recording played. A familiar male voice said, Do not let that woman live. If she drags Monroe out, we lose the whole state. Vega whispered, Who is that? Naomi closed her eyes and recognized the voice, low and powerful, the deputy director of the Illinois Department of Justice. She opened her eyes. Her gaze was a blade drawn from its sheath. All right, the board has changed. This is no longer just local police. This is a monster called government. Outside the glass, the sunset painted the sky crimson. A gust of wind scattered a paper from the envelope onto the floor. At the top of the page, bold letters read, Project Blackout, Confidential. Naomi stooped to pick up the sheet, her expression darkened still as a storm-stilled sea. Vega asked quietly, What is blackout? Naomi answered, her voice low and tolling like an obituary bell. It is the reason they all fear. She opened her laptop and enlarged the first file of Project Blackout. A list of names filled the screen. Police officers, judges, congressmen, even people from the Federal Justice Agency, all of them connected by red lines across an electronic map. Naomi murmured, The second war just revealed its face. This time the opponent is the entire system. Night. The temporary headquarters of the Special Investigation Team glowed only with the pale blue light of screens reflecting on Naomi's face. Outside, the city slept. Inside, she was facing a nightmare written in data. On the screen, a map of Illinois was plastered with hundreds of red dots. Each dot marked a closed case. Each connecting line exposed a tie between cop, prosecutor, and politician. At the center of that network, one name stood out. Deputy Director Alan Mercer, Federal Justice Agency. Vega stood behind her, barely breathing. My God, this whole system is his. Naomi replied softly. No, Vega, it is not his. He controls it. The file labeled Project Blackout was activated in 2016 according to documents hidden on the USB. The description: create a network to internally manage cases that could damage law enforcement's reputation. In other words, an organization that layers crimes under the cover of protecting justice. Naomi scrolled down. A personnel list, hundreds of pages long, unfurled. There were names once celebrated, once medal-awarded heroes who had spoken on television, who had shaken the governor's hand. She clenched her fist. "Justice is not dead," she whispered, "but it is imprisoned inside the very jail it built." Vega was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do we have enough evidence to take this public?" "Not yet. If all we have is this data, they will shut us down at the federal level." "So what do we do?" Naomi looked up at the map. "We need a witness. Someone who is inside Project Blackout and is still alive." The next morning, they met Linda Monroe in a closed interrogation room. White light shone down on the woman who had once commanded all of Brookdale. She now looked decades older. "Carter," Monroe began, "I have been thinking about what you said. You want a witness, I have one, but he will never come willingly." "Who?" "The man who created Blackout Mercer himself." Naomi's lip twitched. "And I suppose he's being protected by the Federal Justice Agency." Monroe nodded. "Sub-Level 4, the Special Office in Columbus. Only biometric clearance and 3-layer authentication will get you in." Vega let out a dry laugh. "So, we are planning to break into the Federal Justice Agency?" Naomi answered, voice low and honed like a blade. "No. We will bring them into the light using their own laws." 3 days later, at a closed session of the State Senate, Naomi presented a classified report. All the evidence had been encrypted and submitted video-audio personnel lists. The air felt lean. An elderly senator frowned. "You are accusing a deputy director of the Federal Justice Agency of running a covert organization inside the federal system. Do you understand the consequences?" Naomi looked him in the eye. "Senator, the real consequence is when innocent people are shot and their files vanish. The real consequence is when justice is bought with fear." The chamber fell silent. Someone asked quietly, "Do you have authentic proof he directed Blackout?" Naomi opened her laptop. A recording played. "Do not let that woman live. If Carter testifies, we lose the whole state." Alan Mercer's voice. The hearing erupted into whispers, but before Naomi could say more, the door slammed open. A team of federal agents surged in. "Agent Carter, you are under arrest for unauthorized access to classified data and the disclosure of federal documents." Vega shouted, "No, they are trying to shut us up." Monroe stood and blocked the path. "If you want to arrest her, arrest me too. Blackout is real, and I have separate evidence." Naomi looked back at them, her voice low but steady. "Do not resist them. I will go, but hold on to the 3rd drive." Vega trembled. "Which drive?" Naomi smiled faintly and whispered, "The drive I sent this morning to the press archive. When justice is blinded, let the public open it." Outside, the sky was lean. Naomi was handcuffed and pushed into a vehicle. Behind the glass, Vega stood silent, clutching the last envelope Naomi had left. Inside it, a handwritten note. "If I fall, do not pity me. Continue." In the prisoner transport, Naomi lifted her head and looked out. The city slid by like a film in reverse. Inside her, there was no fear left, only the belief that sometimes for justice to be reborn, someone must be willing to die first. A cold voice cut from the front seat. "Welcome back, Agent Carter. Mr. Mercer would like to see you." The Federal Justice Agency holding cell sat deep underground, no windows, no natural light. Only the pallid glow of fluorescent tubes washed over Naomi's face, pale and composed, like an iceberg that had yet to melt. The door opened. The slow, measured click of leather shoes sounded like a countdown clock for a bargaining session. Alan Mercer stepped in. His gray suit was lightly creased silver hair combed back, and his smile belonged to a man accustomed to deciding other people's fates. Agent Carter. He said, his voice low and polite, as if greeting a colleague rather than a prisoner. You made me cut short a meeting with the governor. Naomi lifted her chin. You should know I do not call this a meeting. It is an assessment. Mercer gave a faint chuckle. You are as stubborn as your file says. I used to think people like you only existed in ethics textbooks. He pulled a chair and sat opposite her. A single metal table separated them. Between them sat two belief systems, one rotten to the core, the other still aflame. Mercer set a file down on the table. You hold something you do not understand, Carter. Project Blackout is not a conspiracy. It is a necessity. Do you know how many officers would die if the press knew the truth? How many uprisings would erupt? Naomi looked at him, steady, cold, surgical. And you justify murder with the word stability. You think covering things up preserves justice. Mercer tilted his head. His tone softened, almost intimate. You are bright, Carter. I need people like you. Do not waste your ideals on this witch hunt. Join me. I will give you real power, the kind you will never have from the outside. A hush fell, only the even breathing of two people, one tempting the other, measuring. Then Naomi smiled. A small smile, but as cold as steel. You just asked me to betray the very ideals that define me. Do you know Mercer power is not the frightening thing? What is frightening is people who believe they deserve it. Mercer rose slowly, his expression shifting from amusement to cruelty. You have 48 hours. If that hard drive is not handed over in 48 hours, I guarantee you will never see daylight again. We can make you disappear as if you never existed. Naomi straightened her voice low. Interesting, but I should tell you something. Mercer raised an eyebrow. Oh, that drive is no longer with me. Where did you hide it? Not hidden, it has been uploaded. Mercer hesitated, his gaze wavering for the first time. You are lying. Naomi tilted her head, her voice like frost. You can check the Federal Justice Agency internal servers. If I am right, you will hear alarms in 45 seconds. Outside, through the thick glass, the alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed, sirens screamed. An aide burst in, shouting, Deputy Director, blackout data has just been leaked to the federal media system. Major outlets are publishing simultaneously. Mercer spun, his face draining of color. What did you do? He demanded. Naomi answered eerily. Calm, not me. Those who still believe justice is worth the sacrifice. Mercer ground his teeth. You will not get away with this. Naomi looked at him, her eyes shining in the dim. No need to get away. Only need you to be seen in the light. 12 minutes later, Naomi was pulled from the interrogation room. The cuffs were still on, but her step was steadier than ever. Outside, dozens of reporters swarmed the Federal Justice Agency gates. Headlines lit the signs, Blackout exposed. A thunder of public fury rolled, and the storm of accountability had begun. Naomi smiled softly. Mr. Mercer, she said under her breath, you gave me 48 hours. You were wrong. I only needed 12. As she was put into the transport, the internal radio crackled with news. The Federal Committee has ordered suspension of the entire Federal Justice Agency leadership pending investigation. She closed her eyes, drew a slow breath. In the darkness of the vehicle compartment, she heard Vega's voice through a secure earpiece. The backup drive is secure. What is the next move, Commander? Naomi opened her eyes. A faint smile curved her lips. Begin Phase 2. 48 hours after the leak, the whole of America seemed to explode. Across every news channel, the three words Project Blackout flooded headlines, social media, television, and even newspapers that had long been silent before the power. We are witnessing one of the largest legal scandals in American history. A news anchor intoned from the temporary holding room screen. Naomi sat quietly, her hands still cuffed, eyes fixed on the pale blue glow of the old TV. Outside, shouting protest sirens and the chant, "Justice for the silenced," rose in waves. The truth, the thing the system had buried for years, had now pried open its own coffin. The door flew open. Vega stepped in, holding a federal release order. She smiled, relieved, and choked at once. "Commander, they do not have grounds to hold you anymore. And Mercer has been summoned for emergency hearings." Naomi rose, the cuff marks on her wrists visible. "He will not go quietly," she said. "Those used to living in the dark always have a blade ready when dragged into the light." Vega handed her a thin file. "This is fresh forensic analysis. Blackout is not just covering up police crimes. It is a money laundering channel siphoning from anti-terror budgets." Naomi froze. "And who approved that budget?" she asked. Vega swallowed. "The state's Lieutenant Governor, Stephen Ward." Silence filled the room. Naomi gave a tired, sharp smile. "Then phase 2 begins at the political level." That afternoon, they met in the temporary office walls, lined with a dense whiteboard of connection diagrams. Doyle Monroe and a small circle of loyal agents sat around the table. Red lines linked names. Mercer Lieutenant Governor, Ward Finance Director, 2 senators, a massive spiderweb of power and lies. "We cannot launch all investigations publicly at once," Monroe warned. "They will silence each person within 24 hours. Naomi nodded. "We do not need to hit them all. Just pull the central thread. The rest will collapse." She pointed to a name at the center of the diagram. Senator Malcolm Hayes, the man who has publicly praised Blackout as a shield that protects the honor of American policing. Doyle frowned. "Hayes has his own muscle. No one dares touch him." Naomi's voice was icy. "Then we will let him walk into his own trap." That evening, Naomi appeared on live television for a special program, Truth Unfiltered. No theatrics, no slogans, just a steady voice and an unwavering gaze. Blackout is not an organization. It is the psychology of unchecked power. And men like Senator Hayes have used the public's trust to feed that darkness. I do not want to topple this system. I want it to see itself in the mirror. The nation paused. The speech lasted less than 4 minutes, but became the fastest shared video in 24 hours. Hashtag Face the Mirror saturated social feeds. In his private office, Senator Hayes flung a remote at the wall. "You want war," he snarled. A trembling aide said, "Sir, the press is demanding Blackout's financial records." Hayes clenched his fists. "Delete everything now." But it was too late. Doyle and the federal legal team were already en route to his office carrying a search warrant. Outside, rain fell. Naomi stood at the window watching droplets fall like layers of time being washed away. Vega asked, "Do you think they will bow their heads?" Naomi answered softly, "No. But when light floods in, no matter how vast the darkness, it is only the shadow of itself." She turned, eyes bright in the night rain. "Get ready. Phase 2 is not over. This is only the opening strike for the real purge." The phone rang. Vega picked up, her face draining white. "Commander, there is an explosion at the National Data Archive. All original Blackout files have been burned." Naomi stared into the black sky where lightning flashed. Her voice grew. "They are fighting back." Night lit up like day. Not from lamps, but from the fire devouring the National Data Archive. A column of smoke rose like a tower bending against the black sky. Hot shards of metal rained down like a shower of dead stars. Naomi stood a block away from the scene. Her face was motionless, but her eyes had darkened, as if someone had just watched Justice's heart driven through. Vega rushed up, breathing hard. All the original blackout files were burned to ash. No trace left, no backups. This was staged perfectly. Not an accident. An eraser executed through the system. Doyle, who had just taken a call, sounded hoarse. The Federal Investigations Agency has pulled out of the case. The Federal Justice Agency has frozen our team accounts. Carter, they are erasing us from personnel records. A moment of silence. Naomi lifted her face to the sky as rain began to fall. Real rain, heavy and bone-cold. The rain washed the smoke away, but it could not wash the filth of human calculation. The next morning, the press building where the copies were stored had been breached. The backup drives gone. Security cameras cut guards missing. Vega slammed her fist on the table. They are cleaning every trace, everything, every person, every memory. Naomi answered softly. No, they are only painting their true portrait in ash. Monroe looked at her, voice low. And us? What do you plan to do when all evidence has been burnt? Naomi turned her eyes, flashing fierce. When there is no evidence left, we will use the living. That afternoon, she and Vega tracked down one final witness, a low-level data tech, who had backed up the blackout files to an internal server. His name was Noah Briggs, but his apartment was empty. On the wall, in a hurried message written in blood, read, "They know me." Vega recoiled, pale. My God, they got to him first? Naomi closed her eyes. No, he is still alive. The blood is clotted. He wrote it before they took him. She turned to Vega, issuing a sharp order. Tell Monroe trace every police vehicle that left this area in the past 2 hours. Night fell. The team sat in a dark room, lit only by the flicker of laptops. Doyle read the report, her voice trembling slightly. The last GPS ping from the patrol vehicle came from an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Virginia. Naomi stood pulled on her jacket. The reflexive glint of a weapon-mounted flashlight shone at her hip. Let us go, she said. If they want to erase a witness, we will get there first. Monroe stopped her. It is a trap, Carter. You know that. Naomi nodded. I know. But sometimes to break the darkness, you have to go straight to its heart. Outside, the car sped down the slick highway. Streetlights reflected in the windshield. Each streak of light a slice between two worlds, light and crime. Vega drove in silence. Naomi stared through the glass, her voice distant. They think burning the evidence erases the truth, but there is something they cannot incinerate: the memory of those who saw. She tightened her fist, her eyes fixed on the distance where the red flashing light of the old warehouse appeared in the rain. One thought occupied her mind. Either save Noah Briggs or die with him. When the car pulled up to the warehouse, the interior lights went out. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker, low and cold. Welcome back, Agent Carter. We have been expecting you. Vega gripped the wheel. Naomi removed the safety from her gun. Her eyes blazed in the rainy night. This ends here. Rain poured as if the sky itself knew blood was about to be spilled. The old warehouse stood alone on the outskirts of Virginia. Red lights blinking on its roof, reflecting in the puddles below like open wounds leaking light. Naomi stepped out of the car, hands steady on the gun at her hip. The iron door creaked open, the hinge screaming like a strangled voice. A loudspeaker crackled its tone, deep, cold, polished, like sharpened steel. You are persistent, Carter. But tell me who taught you to believe justice exists beyond the barrel of a gun? She moved closer, headlights glinting off her rain-soaked hair. And you, she answered. Who taught you to believe power can kill the truth? A dry, jagged laugh echoed back from the darkness. 6 men in black stepped out, AR-15s gleaming in the rain. Between them, Alan Mercer. "Where is Noah?" Naomi asked, her voice calm enough to make even Mercer hesitate. "Him," Mercer shrugged. "Somewhere in this place. You are just in time. The execution is about to start." Vega whispered, "At least 7 gunmen. We cannot win this." "We do not need to win," Naomi murmured. "We just need to bring the light here." She pulled a small device from her pocket, a satellite transmitter. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Calling the police? I am the police, Carter." Naomi gave a faint, sharp smile. "No, I am calling the entire country." She pressed the button. A single beep. In the sky above, a blue light flickered. Live drones from the national news network already in position, thanks to Doyle's plan. "Smile for the camera, Mercer," Naomi said. "The whole nation is watching." Mercer's face twisted. "Shoot her!" he screamed. But before fingers could pull triggers, a flood of white light cut through the rain. Federal agents stormed in. Gunfire erupted. Shouts filled the air. Flashlights strobed through the haze. Naomi sprinted inside, finding Noah tied to a chair in the middle of the room, blood soaking his shirt, but his eyes still awake. "Carter," he rasped. "I kept the backup. The chip is inside my pocket." She cut his ropes and held his trembling hand. "You have done enough," she said. "I will handle the rest." Outside, Mercer was forced to the ground. The harsh white beams illuminated his face. No power now, only naked panic. "You will regret this," he hissed. Naomi looked down at him, her voice low, steady. "No, I will sleep well. But you will dream of every person you buried in this darkness." The rain stopped. The first light of dawn pierced through the gray clouds, falling on the scorched roof of the warehouse. Vega stepped beside her. "Is it over?" Naomi shook her head. "No, this is only the beginning. When darkness is dragged into the light, it thrashes hardest." A week later, the congressional hearing on Project Blackout convened. Mercer sat in handcuffs, flanked by guards. But in the gallery above, another face appeared, the state's Lieutenant Governor Stephen Ward. He smiled faintly and nodded at Naomi, a challenge in his eyes. And she knew the war was not over. Early morning in Columbus, Ohio, the sky hung thick and gray, as if warning what was still to come. In front of the state capitol, hundreds of reporters, cameras, and citizens gathered banners, raised high justice for the silenced "No More Blackout." Inside, the federal hearing began. The air was so heavy one could hear every breath. At the center of the vast chamber, Naomi Carter entered no longer in the cold black suit of an agent, but a plain white shirt, her wrists still marked from the cuffs. Across from her sat Alan Mercer, now just a shell of a man, and on the front row, Lieutenant Governor Stephen Ward, immaculate suit, immaculate smile, and eyes utterly void of a soul. The gavel struck. This hearing on the Blackout case, Phase 2, is now in session. Doyle rose first, voice steady yet sharp as a blade. "We have determined that Blackout was not merely a cover-up of police crimes, but a network for laundering money, manipulating budgets, and controlling the media. And the one who authorized every expenditure was Lieutenant Governor Stephen Ward." Murmurs rippled through the room. Ward raised an eyebrow, smiling politely. "You are accusing me based on fabricated data leaked by a rogue agent. I am afraid, Madame, you are confusing justice with publicity." Naomi bowed her head slightly and stepped to the witness stand. Her voice was low, clear, and unwavering. "If you wish to speak of fabrications, then explain why your fingerprints were found on the payment device used in the Virginia warehouse laundering scheme." Ward gave a thin smile. "Fingerprints. You know how many administrative files bear my signature. You are staging theater, Carter. Naomi opened her folder and pulled out a red data chip, the one Noah Briggs had hidden in his jacket before he was captured. "Not theater," she said. Truth caught on record. The large screen flickered on. Video played Ward and Mercer in a hidden conference room. "Money from Blackout must pass through the community aid channel. Keep the files clean. Anyone who talks, remove them." Ward's voice was clear as steel striking stone. The chamber erupted. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Mercer hung his head silent. Ward stayed seated, smiling. A smile so cold, it could freeze blood. "You really think these tapes can bring me down?" he said quietly. "Carter, you are not fighting me. You are fighting the wall that holds this country together." Doyle slammed her hand on the table. "No, sir. She is pulling that wall into the light." Ward laughed, rising from his chair. "Then let us see if light can melt steel." At that instant, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the chamber. A heartbeat later. Bang! Screams. Chaos. Blood splattered across marble. When the lights came back, Mercer lay slumped over the table, a bullet through his forehead. A sniper in police uniform was being pinned to the ground. Vega rushed to Naomi, her shoulder grazed by a bullet. Doyle shouted, "Get Ward out of here!" But Ward did not run. He only stared at Mercer's corpse, then turned to Naomi. "You just witnessed the price of breaking the rules. Next time it will be you." Outside, rain poured again. Naomi was lifted into an ambulance, blood soaking her shirt, but her eyes stayed open, staring at the sky. Her voice cracked, but each word was sharp. "He just shot himself in the foot. Vega, there is no covering it up now. The whole country saw across every channel." The footage from the hearing spread live. A headline blazed across the screen. "The Fall of Power. Federal investigation into Blackout officially launched." That night in the hospital's dim room, Naomi opened her eyes. Monroe stood beside her and said softly, "Ward is losing ground. But his people in Congress are mobilizing. They are preparing a counterstrike." Naomi gazed at the ceiling, eyes blazing against the dark. "Then we stop defending. Phase 3 begins. Bring every truth to the public, no more filters." She turned to Vega, voice firm. "Get ready. This time, we do not need a courtroom. We need a nation watching." Outside, thunder tore the sky open. The real storm had arrived. 1 month after the hearing, Columbus entered winter. Snow blanketed the state capitol steps, covering the footprints of reporters, agents, and protesters, silent witnesses to an age of deceit. Naomi stood alone by the marble railing, wind tugging at her hair. Her gaze fixed on the building beyond the flag, still waving, shameless and unafraid. Ward was arrested. Those who had hidden behind him fell in succession. Senators, prosecutors, police generals, even journalists once paid to manage public sentiment. Project Blackout collapsed, not because it was defeated, but because no one believed in it anymore. In a small hospital on the city's edge, Noah Briggs lived. He had lost a lung, but his eyes were brighter than ever. "You know the strangest thing?" he said weakly. After the news broke, thousands of officers filed requests to audit their own divisions. They said they did not want to be called Blackout anymore. Naomi smiled faintly. "The world does not need more heroes," she said. "It just needs more people capable of shame." Vega folded her arms beside her. "And you are a national symbol now." Naomi shook her head. "No, I am just someone who lived long enough to tell the story others never got to." Outside, snow thickened. Doyle entered, holding a new folder. "The federal prosecutors want you as a special advisor for the National Justice Reform Council." "You—" Naomi glanced out the window. The afternoon light hit the snow like a blank page. "No," she said. "I do not want to write laws. I want to teach people to read them and understand." Doyle was quiet, then nodded. "You have chosen the hardest path, the only one still true." That evening, Naomi left the hospital and drove beyond the city. She stopped at the military cemetery. Amid rows of faded stone stood one unmarked grave, engraved only with the words, "For those who were silenced." She knelt, laid a white rose. The wind bit cold, but her chest felt warm. For the first time in years, darkness no longer frightened her. The next morning, national television aired a special, "The Day We Face the Mirror." The host said, "No one knows who coined the phrase that swept the country, but today Face the Mirror has become the oath of law enforcement. No more blackout, only dawn light." Naomi watched the broadcast from a small cafe. The barista recognized her, stammering. "You are Agent Carter, right? I just wanted to say thank you. My brother, he was wrongfully arrested. They reopened his case." She smiled softly, saying nothing. It was not the smile of pride, but of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you realize what you did finally reached another heart. Night. Her apartment was quiet. Naomi opened her laptop and began typing the first lines of a new book. "Justice is not born from law, but from those brave enough to keep it alive. I once thought I was fighting evil men, but in the end, I learned I was fighting silence." She paused, gazed out the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. A faint pink glow stretched across the horizon. Dawn was rising. Vega knocked and entered with a grin. "Morning coffee, Commander. Word is the committee is drafting the Dawn Rise Act. Your name is on the honorary advisor list." Naomi replied gently. "I do not need to be remembered. I just need people to have the courage to turn on the light when they see the dark." She closed her laptop, looking out over the awakening city. Window after window lit up like thousands of souls awakening at once. And in that moment, Naomi knew the war was over. Darkness never dies. But as long as someone dares to face it, dawn will always return.